Hello. Hey, welcome to my channel. My name is Brooke, and this is where I talk about books. Today on my channel, I'm going to be discussing A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This is the story of 4 friends over several decades. This story takes place in New York City. Despite there being several different perspectives in the story, there is a central character, and Yanagihara does an excellent job of seamlessly foreshadowing future events throughout the novel. So seamlessly. There's parts in the story when you're almost not sure how it's gonna tie in, and then it ends up doing it. One example of this is like in the middle of the story, she talks about or writes about an axiom, and I'm not well versed in axioms, but I did get the gist of the message, and then she ties that in really well with the end of the story. Things like that, just elements that sort of go from beginning to end. She just did so very, very well. That was one thing I enjoyed most about the book, was as I neared the end being like, oh, it just was so well done. Despite the length of the novel, there's a surprising lack of extraneous detail. Each part of the novel is crucial to the next part of the story, and they all really just tie together so well. The character development is excellent. The background stories of even like the side characters are so well thought out and put together. I found myself picking up my phone to Google things, despite the fact that this is a fiction. I just wanted to know, like, what is this based off of? It was excellent. Yanagihara does this amazing thing where she can paint the most beautiful imagery even out of the most like disgusting scenes and situations. If you have a copy of A Little Life at Home, an example of what I'm talking about is the first paragraph on page 79. And while it is a very traumatic scene, you can see what I mean with how the word choice she uses makes this horrific thing just like vivid. And I don't necessarily mean beautiful in the sense that it's something you would want to look at. I mean beautiful in the sense that you can really see with her words what she's telling us. I suppose that what I mean is that her craft is beautiful, not necessarily what she's describing. So there's that. She also does this incredible job of giving the characters equating personalities to their professions. So I can see, for example, the main character, especially as he gets older, sort of, I can just picture him in my head and what this person would look like and sound like, and especially in the profession that Yanagihara gave him. It was really well done. And I would say the same thing for the other characters in the story as well. Characters were really well thought out, really well developed, really well understood. Again, just an excellent understanding of the craft Yanagihara has. So, moving on. I've mentioned it before, the perspective changes in this novel with the chapters. So one chapter you're in the main character's perspective, the next chapter you're in one of his friends' perspectives, and it sort of changes throughout the novel, and it can be slightly disorienting at first, but I don't want that to deter anyone from reading the novel. It does get easier as the novel goes on. Once you get to know the characters and you know sort of who is who more clearly, their voices become more apparent earlier on in the switch. I still did find, like, towards the end of the book specifically, I don't know if it's because I was just anxious to know what was going to happen next, or if it was because I was tired, because I read it relatively late at night. But I did notice, like, even towards the end of the book, that I was like, wait, who is this? And I would have to, like, go back and reread again because I wanted to understand exactly what was happening. So, oh gosh. Anyways, I thought that the Yanagihara's choice of final voice was deeply moving. I did, however, find myself curious what it would have been like in another perspective. If or when you read this book, I would love to hear what people thought about the final voice and if it was what you were expecting it to be. That, again, it was deeply, deeply moving. I cried like a little baby, but yes. I would like to hear other people's point of view about the final voice that the author used in this novel. I would love to just talk about this novel incessantly with anyone who is interested in talking about it with me. You can find me on Instagram as well, @paperbackbrookie. Send me a DM, let's chat. I have so many thoughts, but I want to keep my reviews on here relatively spoiler free, so I don't want to give anything away. There's something I love deeply about seeing people reading a book. Like, I've seen people read this, but I didn't know anything about it going into it other than obviously it was going to break my heart. But not knowing anything about a story makes it, I think, more personal and more moving. There's just something just about discovering a little life in this book. I can't give anything away, but I would love to talk about it. As I was saying, there's a specific part in this book that moved me where she wrote about a parent's love and how it equates to fear. And as a mother myself, I just found her thoughts and philosophies on fear and love just deeply moving and perplexing. And one thing that I loved the most about this book were the philosophical properties in it. I wrote a paper last term for my philosophy class, and I really wish that I had read this book before I wrote my paper. I would have used it in my paper. You can tell that Yanagihara has spent significant time sort of figuring out her own personal philosophies, and the way she wove them into her story was incredible. So throughout the novel, I did find myself relating to the main character in many ways. Found myself grateful, however, that I hadn't been through the things that he had been through. I think anyone could read the story and just find deep gratitude for their life after hearing the story in here. But despite the different sorts of things that gave the main character in this novel trauma, and me my trauma, and you your trauma, I mean, if you have trauma, we all do. Anyways, it sort of just was interesting to me how, despite varying traumas, how that lasting effect on you as a human individual can be so similar. So two people who've gone through something incredibly different but still traumatic experience similar feelings about themselves and the world around them after the trauma. And I think that in particular is one of the most important messages in this book, and it deserves all the recognition it's getting. All the recognition it's getting. No spoilers. There's a section in here, I'm not going to say anything about it. There were several that were really hard to read, but there was a section with a specific character that made me physically ill. I just couldn't believe what I was reading after everything that I had already read. For me to be reading that then with that specific character, I was just mind blown, but then also I could relate. So it was necessary, again, for the course of the story but it made me very, very upset overall. Read this book. You must read this book. It's hard, it's uncomfortable, it's horrific, it's beautiful, and it's necessary. Absolutely necessary. Read this book. I will leave you today with a quote from the book on page 705. Yanagihara writes, "Life is so sad," he would think in those moments. It's so sad. And yet we all do it. We all cling to it. We all search for something to give us solace. And I think that's really beautiful and true. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and give A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara 5 out of 5 stars. I recommend this book to any living, breathing human being on the face of this planet. It's necessary to read this book. Doesn't matter how uncomfortable it is. The uncomfortable conversations are often the most important, and I think that this book is important. So if you haven't read it, please read it. If you have read it, please message me. I would love to discuss it further without giving anything away to those who haven't read it yet. So thank you guys for being here today. I hope you enjoyed me talking about this book, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.